They told me the non-disclosure agreement lasts for 50 years. They told me that if I spoke a single word of this to anyone, my pension would vanish, my reputation would be destroyed, and accidents would happen to the people I love. For 20 years, I believed them. For 20 years, I stayed silent while the nightmares ate me alive from the inside out. But I am 72 years old now. The doctors found the cancer in my lungs 3 months ago. They say it is aggressive. They say it comes from the burn pits we stood next to in Bagram. I know it comes from the stress. I know it comes from the nights I spent staring at the ceiling, waiting for a sound that I pray I never hear again. I don't care about their threats anymore. I don't care about the suits in Washington who think they can scrub history clean with a black marker and a shredder. People need to know. The families need to know. God, the families of the men we lost. They deserve to know that their sons didn't die in a training accident. They didn't die in an ambush by insurgents. They didn't die fighting men. They died fighting something that shouldn't exist. Something that defies biology, religion, and sanity. My name is, well, let's just call me Spectre. That was my call sign in 2002. I was a Tier 1 operator attached to a unit that doesn't officially exist on any Pentagon budget. We were the guys they called when the Rangers or the SEALs hit a wall. We were the cleaners. We were the ghosts. Most people think the war in Afghanistan was about terrorists. About caves, RPGs, and ideology. And for 99% of the guys over there, it was. But there are valleys in that country, places where the maps just stop. Places where the locals don't go. Not because of the Taliban. Not because of mines. But because of what lives in the dark. I saw something in the Kandahar Mountains. Something that made me question my sanity, my God, and reality itself. I am recording this tape as a dead man's switch. If you are hearing this, I am already gone. And this story is finally free. It started in August of 2002. We were stationed at Bagram Airfield, bored out of our minds. The initial invasion was over, and we were mostly doing mop-up operations. High-value target extraction. Knocking down doors in the middle of the night. Routine stuff for guys like us. We were hungry for a fight, arrogant, thinking we were the apex predators on this planet. We thought we had the best gear, the best training, and the best intel. We had no idea how small we really were. The call came in at 0300 hours. It wasn't through the normal chain of command. A spook from the agency, the CIA, walked right into our barracks. He didn't wear a uniform. Just cargo pants and a polo shirt, looking like a tourist who took a wrong turn into a war zone. But his eyes were dead. He cleared the room, leaving only me and my commanding officer. He didn't introduce himself. He just placed a cassette recorder on the table and pressed play. He played us a radio transmission. It was from a patrol of regular infantry, a squad of 8 men, that had gone missing in a remote sector of the Kandahar province 3 days prior. The audio was disturbing. It wasn't the frantic screaming of a firefight. It wasn't the chaotic noise of an ambush. It was static. Heavy, rhythmic interference. And underneath the static, you could hear whispers. Frantic, terrified whispers. Then, a scream. Not a scream of pain, but of primal terror. And then, a sound I will never forget as long as I live. A roar. But not like a lion or a bear. It sounded like a man, but amplified. Like a man with lungs the size of oil drums. The sound distorted the microphone. It felt heavy even through the tape. We lost contact at 0400, the CIA spook said. His face was pale, sweating slightly despite the air conditioning. Drone flyovers show nothing. No heat signatures. No bodies. Just silence. We asked what the intel was. Taliban stronghold. Al-Qaeda hideout. He looked us in the eye and said, "We don't know. The locals call the area the Valley of the Bones. They say people who go in don't come out. Your mission is simple, search and recovery. Find the patrol. If they are alive, bring them home. If they are dead, bring back the tags. And if you find whatever took them, neutralize it." I remember laughing. I actually laughed. I thought it was a joke. A ghost story to scare the new guys. I didn't know that I was flying straight into hell. We loaded up onto the Chinook at 0200. The team was heavy. We carried M4 carbines with SOP-mod kits, SAW gunners with thousands of rounds, at 4 rocket launchers, and enough fragmentation grenades to level a city block. We were expecting a siege. We were expecting a hardened bunker complex. The flight was long. As we moved deeper into the mountain range, the terrain changed. It stopped looking like the Afghanistan we knew. The jagged peaks seemed sharper, darker. The moon was full, casting long, twisted shadows into the valleys below. I remember looking at Miller, my point man. He was a kid from Ohio, built like a tank, fearless. He was cleaning his knife, joking about how he was going to be back in time for chow. He had a wife and a newborn daughter waiting for him back in the States. He showed me her picture before we lifted off. I still see his face every time I close my eyes. I still see that picture burning in my mind. The pilot's voice crackled over the comms. "LZ in sight. 5 mics out. Heads up, boys, the instruments are acting funny." He wasn't lying. The GPS was flickering. The altimeter was jumping. It was like the mountain itself was rejecting our technology. We touched down on a rocky plateau about 3 clicks from the patrol's last known location. The dust settled, and the bird lifted off, leaving us in absolute silence. That is the first thing that hit me. The silence. In a war zone, there is always noise. Distant gunfire, the hum of generators, the wind, insects. But here. Nothing. No crickets. No birds. No wind. It was a dead zone. The air felt heavy, stale, like the air inside a tomb that hasn't been opened in 1,000 years. It smelled of sulfur and something else. Copper. The smell of old blood. It hung in the air like a fog. "Check your corners," I whispered over the comms. "Move out." We moved in a wedge formation, our night vision goggles turning the world into a green phosphorescent nightmare. The ground was treacherous, loose shale and massive boulders that looked like they had been thrown around by giants. As we hiked, we started finding things. First, it was a boot. A standard-issue U.S. Army combat boot. It wasn't unlaced. It was torn. Ripped apart at the seams as if the foot inside had been pulled out with tremendous force. The leather was shredded. Then, a radio. Crushed. Flattened like a soda can. The internal components were spilled out onto the rocks. "Boss," Miller whispered. "Look at this." He was kneeling by a rock face. I walked over. There were marks on the stone. Scratches. But they weren't from shrapnel or bullets. They were claw marks. Deep grooves cut into solid granite. I put my hand next to them. The span of the fingers was massive. Whatever made those marks had a hand twice the size of a human. A cold shiver went down my spine. I gripped my rifle tighter. "Stay sharp. We are not alone out here." We tracked the trail of debris for another hour. It led us up a steep incline toward the mouth of a massive cave system. The cave entrance was huge, maybe 15 feet high, framed by jagged rocks that looked like teeth. And the smell. God, the smell. It hit us like a physical blow. The stench of rotting meat, feces, and musk. It was so strong that Doc, our medic, gagged and almost threw up inside his mask. It smelled like a slaughterhouse left to rot in the sun for a week. We stopped at the perimeter of the cave. I signaled for the team to hold. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Every instinct I had as a soldier was screaming at me to turn around, to run, to call in an airstrike and burn this mountain to ash. But we had a mission. We leave no man behind. That is the creed. That is the lie we tell ourselves to keep moving forward. Miller, take point. Johnson, flank left. Let's see what's in there. We entered the cave. The darkness was absolute. Our NVGs were struggling to cut through the gloom. The IR illuminators cast long, dancing shadows on the walls. The floor of the cave was uneven, covered in dirt and debris. As we moved deeper, the beam of my light caught something white on the ground. Bones. Thousands of them. But not just animal bones. We saw goat skulls, sure. But mixed in with them were human skulls. Rib cages. Femurs. Some were old, brittle and yellow. Others were fresh, still slick with marrow. It was a boneyard. A dining room for something monstrous. And in the center of the pile, we saw it. The gear of the missing patrol. Their backpacks were piled up in a heap. Their rifles, M16s, were snapped in half like twigs. Snapped in half. Do you know how much force it takes to snap a rifle barrel? A human can't do that. A machine does that. Where are the bodies? Johnson whispered. Where are the men? We didn't have to wait long for the answer. From the back of the cave, deep in the shadows, we heard a sound. It was a shifting of weight. Heavy footsteps. Thud. 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 The ground beneath our boots vibrated. Dust fell from the ceiling. Contact front. Miller shouted, raising his weapon. And then, it stepped into the light. I want you to visualize this clearly. Because I have lived with this image for 20 years. It was humanoid. It had 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head. But that is where the similarity ended. The thing stood at least 12, maybe 13 feet tall. It had to stoop to avoid hitting the ceiling of the cavern. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched tight over muscles that looked like cords of steel. It wore crude coverings made of animal skins and pieces of uniforms. But the face, that's what haunts me. It had a massive, jutting jaw. And hair, long, matted, fiery red hair that hung down to its shoulders. Not orange, but crimson red. Its eyes were set deep in its skull, glowing with a reflective luminescence in our night vision. It was holding something. A spear. But it wasn't a stick. It was a massive shaft of wood, tipped with a blade that looked like it had been forged from ancient iron. For a second, nobody moved. We were frozen in pure, biological shock. The brain cannot process something that shouldn't exist. We were looking at a myth. A monster. A Nephilim. Then, the creature roared. It wasn't a movie roar. It was a sound frequency that I felt in my teeth. It was a challenge. And then it moved. For something that size, it was impossibly fast. It covered the 30 feet between us in a blur. Open fire. Light him up. I screamed. The cave erupted in noise. 8 M4 carbines and a SAW machine gun opened up on full auto. We are talking about 5.56 mm rounds. Green tip penetrators. Designed to punch through body armor and helmets. We were hitting it. I saw the impacts. Puffs of dust and blood mist exploding off its chest and arms. But it didn't stop. It didn't even slow down. It was like shooting a grizzly bear with a BB gun. The creature ignored the bullets, focused entirely on the threat. It reached Miller. Miller was a big guy. He was screaming, firing his weapon point blank into the creature's stomach. The giant didn't care. It swung that spear with one hand. The sound of the impact was wet. The spear went through Miller's tactical vest, through his chest, and out the back. It lifted him off the ground, lifted a 200-pound man in full gear, like he was a ragdoll. Miller's scream was cut short as the creature slammed him against the cave wall. "Man down! Man down!" Doc shouted, rushing forward. "Fall back. Hit it in the head. Aim for the head." I was firing controlled bursts now, trying to find a weak spot. The saw gunner, a guy named Rodriguez, held the trigger down. A stream of tracers hammered the giant's face. It recoiled, roaring in annoyance, shielding its eyes with a massive hand. It had 6 fingers. I saw them clearly. 6 fingers on each hand. RPG. Hit it with the rocket. I yelled to Johnson. Johnson fumbled with the at-4. The creature was turning toward him, dropping Miller's lifeless body. It snarled, revealing teeth, double rows of teeth, jagged and yellow. Johnson shouldered the launcher. Backblast area clear. Whoosh! The rocket streaked across the cave. It hit the creature in the right shoulder. The explosion was deafening in the confined space. It knocked us all off our feet. Dust and smoke filled the air. My ears were ringing. I couldn't hear anything but a high-pitched whine. I scrambled up, coughing, raising my rifle. "Report. Is it down?" Through the smoke, a shadow rose. It was hurt. The rocket had torn a massive chunk out of its shoulder. Black blood was pouring down its chest. But it wasn't dead. It was furious. It picked up a rock the size of a microwave and hurled it at us. It missed my head by inches and shattered against the wall. "Shoot it in the face. Now!" I screamed. We all concentrated fire. Every gun we had left. Hundreds of rounds pouring into its skull. Finally, the sheer kinetic energy was too much. The creature stumbled. It dropped to one knee. Then it fell forward, shaking the ground as it hit the dirt. We didn't stop shooting. We emptied our magazines into it until our bolts clicked open on empty chambers. Silence returned to the cave. We stood there, panting, shaking, the air thick with smoke and the smell of burnt gunpowder and copper. I walked over to Miller. He was gone. The spear had destroyed his heart. I looked at the thing. Up close, it was even more terrifying. The smell was overpowering. It looked ancient. Its skin was leathery, scarred from what looked like centuries of fighting. "What is that?" Rodriguez whispered. "What the hell is that?" "I don't know," I said. "But it bleeds." We called it in. "Giant down. 1 Kia. Requesting immediate extraction." The radio silence on the other end lasted for a long time. Then, the CIA spook came on. His voice was calm. Too calm. "Secure the perimeter. Do not touch the asset. Extraction is inbound. ETA 10 minutes. When the chopper arrived, it wasn't a medevac. It was a modified Chinook, painted black, with no markings. Men in unmarked uniforms jumped out. They didn't look at us. They didn't look at Miller's body. They went straight to the giant. They had a cargo net. It took 10 men to roll the creature onto it. They hooked it up to the chopper's winch and lifted it out, dangling beneath the aircraft like a prize catch. The spook walked up to me. He handed me a clipboard. "You saw nothing," he said. "You engaged a pocket of Taliban resistance. You took casualties. You neutralized the threat. That is the official report." I looked at him. I wanted to punch him. I wanted to scream. My man is dead. Killed by a monster. What was that thing? He leaned in close. That was a relic. And it's not the only one. Now sign the paper, Sergeant. Or you won't make it home. I signed. We all signed. We flew back to Bagram in silence. They confiscated our cameras. They debriefed us for 48 hours straight. They told us we were hallucinating from hypoxia and stress. They threatened our families. Miller's family was told he died a hero in a firefight with insurgents. They gave him a silver star. But they buried an empty coffin. They never gave us his body back. I've lived with this for 20 years. I've seen the internet stories. The Kandahar giant. People think it's a fun spooky story. They make memes about it. It's not a story. It's real. And the scariest part isn't that we found a giant in a cave. The scariest part is that when we found the bone pile, we found equipment that didn't belong to the patrol we were looking for. We found British muskets from the 1800s. We found Soviet AK-47s from the 80s. And we found a helmet. A bronze helmet that looked like something Alexander the Great's army would have worn. That thing had been feeding for a long, long time. And the spook said it wasn't the only one. So, when you look at those mountains on the news, just remember. There are things in this world that we are not meant to see. And there are people in our government who will kill to keep them hidden. My name is Spectre. And this is my confession. I often think about the nature of evil. We are taught that evil is a choice, a moral failing. But what I saw in that cave wasn't evil in the way a terrorist is evil. It was ancient. It was a predator that viewed us not as enemies, but as cattle. The way it looked at us, there was intelligence there. It wasn't just a beast. It knew what weapons we had. It knew how to use cover until it was too late for us. And the smell. I can still smell it. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, in my safe suburban house, and I smell that mixture of copper and rot. I check the locks. I check the windows. But I know that if one of those things wanted to get in, a lock wouldn't stop it. I have spent the last 2 decades trying to find answers. I used my clearance, before I retired, to dig into the archives. I found redactions. I found blacked-out files from the Soviet invasion in the 80s. There were reports of Spetsnaz teams vanishing in the same sector. The Soviets called it the Devil's Playground. They tried to bomb the valley, to seal the caves. But it didn't work. You can't kill a mountain. And you can't kill what lives inside it with just bombs. I suspect the government has known about them for a long time. Maybe they are guarding them. Maybe they are studying them. Or maybe, just maybe, they are afraid of them. When the black helicopter lifted that thing into the air, I saw its arm twitch. Just a little. It was drugged, or in shock, but it wasn't dead. They took it somewhere. Where do you keep a 13-foot giant? Area 51. Some underground bunker in Nevada? I don't know. And I don't want to know. All I know is that they have it. And if they have one, they might try to breed it. They might try to weaponize it. The thought of those things wearing armor, carrying heavy weapons, it freezes my blood. Miller's daughter is 20 years old now. She looks just like him. I saw her once, at a memorial service. She walked up to me and asked if her father suffered. She asked if he said anything at the end. I lied to her. I told her he died instantly. I told her he didn't feel a thing. I couldn't tell her that her father was impaled by a biblical monster in a dark cave on the other side of the world. I couldn't tell her that his last moment was one of pure, unadulterated horror. I carry that lie with me. It's heavier than any rucksack I ever humped. The cancer is spreading. I can feel it in my chest. It feels like a weight, pressing down on me. In a way, it's a relief. Soon, I won't have to remember the sound of bones snapping. I won't have to remember the red hair and the 6 fingers. But before I go, I had to put this on tape. I had to let it out. Because the truth is like a rot. If you keep it inside, it eats you. If you let it out, maybe it can heal the wound. Or maybe it just spreads the infection. I don't know. I'm just a soldier. I followed orders. And my orders were to forget. But I failed that mission. I never forgot. If you are listening to this, be careful. Do not go looking for the Valley of the Bones. Do not dig into the files of Operation Broken Tusk. Let sleeping giants lie. Because if you wake them up, if you draw their attention, there is no weapon on this earth that can save you. We got lucky. We had a rocket launcher and a squad of Tier 1 operators, and we barely survived. If you are alone, you are just food.